They were loud. They were crude. They were everything television wasn't supposed to be. And that's exactly why millions of people couldn't stop watching. When Married with Children first appeared on television in 1987, almost no one believed it would survive. Critics dismissed it. Industry insiders doubted it. Even some of the actors weren't sure it was worth their time. On paper, it looked like a disaster waiting to happen, a dysfunctional family, offensive jokes, and a tone that deliberately challenged everything audiences were used to. And yet, somehow, it didn't just survive. It exploded. Week after week, viewers returned to watch the Bundy family tear each other apart with insults, complaints, and brutal honesty. They weren't lovable in the traditional sense. They didn't grow emotionally. They didn't learn heartfelt lessons. They simply endured life, miserably, hilariously, and honestly. But while audiences laughed at the chaos unfolding on screen, an entirely different story was playing out behind the cameras. A story filled with resentment, insecurity, secrets, and pain. And years later, when the truth finally surfaced, it revealed that the Bundy family wasn't the only thing held together by tension. It began as a gamble. The show was created by television writers Michael G. Moy and Ron Levitt for the brand new Fox network. At the time, Fox was an underdog. It didn't have the prestige or power of its competitors. It needed something bold, something that would force audiences to pay attention. So, instead of copying the success of wholesome family sitcoms like The Cosby Show, Fox did the exact opposite. Executives gave the creators a simple instruction: break the rules. The result was the Bundy family. Al Bundy, a defeated shoe salesman. Peggy Bundy, his lazy and unapologetic wife. Their children, Kelly and Bud, who were just as flawed and self-absorbed as their parents. This wasn't a family that inspired viewers. It reflected them. At the center of it all was Al Bundy, played by Ed O'Neill. Al wasn't a hero. He was a man haunted by his past, clinging to the memory of scoring 4 touchdowns in a single high school football game as the peak of his existence. Every day after that had been a slow, painful decline. He hated his job. He hated his life. And yet he kept going. Audiences recognized that feeling. Across from him was Peggy Bundy, played by Katie Sagal. Peggy wasn't interested in cooking, cleaning, or contributing. She lived for shopping sprees and television, unapologetically spending money the family didn't have. She mocked Al constantly, but their relationship endured, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Their daughter Kelly, played by Christina Applegate, quickly became one of the most recognizable characters on television. She was beautiful, naive, and often underestimated. Meanwhile, Bud Bundy desperately tried and failed to escape the shadow of his family's dysfunction. Next door lived Marcy, the Bundys' intellectual and fiercely opinionated neighbor, played by Amanda Bearse. Her constant battles with Al became one of the show's defining dynamics. Together, these characters created something unpredictable, something dangerous, something audiences had never seen before. But success didn't come easily. From the very beginning, critics attacked the show. They called it vulgar, tasteless, offensive. Some believed it represented everything wrong with modern television. Even Fox's own leadership had doubts. Network executive Barry Diller reportedly questioned whether the show could survive its own controversy. Ironically, the criticism only made people more curious. Viewers tuned in to see what all the outrage was about. And once they started watching, they couldn't look away. Part of the magic came from its contradictions. The show opened every episode with the warm, nostalgic sound of Love and Marriage, sung by Frank Sinatra. It was a song associated with romance and stability. But what followed was anything but stable. That contrast became the show's identity. By its 3rd season, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Despite the criticism, the audience kept growing. The Bundys had become cultural icons. But behind the laughter, tensions were quietly building. The set wasn't always a happy place. The actors, while professional, didn't always get along. Years later, Ed O'Neill would admit that his relationship with Amanda Bearse had been strained for years. The conflict began during a moment that should have been a celebration. The cast had been selected for a major magazine cover, but not everyone was included. Burse and another cast member were left out, and they hoped O'Neill would defend them. He didn't. He later admitted that decision haunted him. At the time, he was afraid that pushing the issue might risk the opportunity entirely, but his choice created a fracture that would take years to heal. It was a reminder that success often came with a cost. For Christina Applegate, the pressure was even more personal. She had been just a teenager when the show began. Suddenly, she found herself transformed into a symbol. Her character's appearance became a central focus, and the expectations placed on her were overwhelming. She later revealed that the scrutiny contributed to a severe eating disorder. She hid her struggle from everyone. She remembered feeling ashamed just to eat in front of others. She would isolate herself, hiding in private spaces to avoid judgment. The character that made her famous had also trapped her in a painful reality she didn't know how to escape. The audience saw confidence. Behind the scenes, she felt fear. Katie Sagal would later describe the environment as harsh, honest to the point of cruelty. People said things they shouldn't have said. They criticized each other openly. The emotional safety that viewers assumed existed simply wasn't there. And yet, the show continued. Because in front of the cameras, everything worked. Even the guest stars brought chaos. One of the most unpredictable was comedian Sam Kinison. Known for his explosive personality, Kinison's brief time on the show left a lasting impression. His behavior was wild, uncontrolled, at times even frightening. His presence blurred the line between comedy and danger. He wasn't the only surprising casting possibility. At one point, producers had considered casting Roseanne Barr in a lead role. But ultimately, the chemistry of the final cast proved irreplaceable. Still, no amount of success could protect the show from the reality of television. After more than a decade on the air, the end came suddenly. There was no grand farewell, no emotional goodbye. Ed O'Neill didn't learn about the cancellation from the network. He learned from strangers. He was staying at a quiet bed and breakfast when a newly married couple approached him. They recognized him instantly. They smiled. They congratulated him. And then, almost casually, they offered their condolences. They had heard the news on the radio. His show had been canceled. He hadn't been told. He thanked them politely, hiding his shock. After 11 years of dedication, the end of his journey had arrived not with ceremony, but with silence. Christina Applegate experienced the same thing. She didn't receive a personal call. She heard through rumors, through whispers, through people who had heard from other people. It was an ending that felt incomplete. Unlike the stars of the Golden Girls, who reportedly received lavish farewell gifts, the cast of Married with Children received nothing. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just the quiet realization that it was over. And yet, in the years that followed, something unexpected happened. The show refused to disappear. New generations discovered it. They laughed at the same jokes. They recognized the same struggles. They saw themselves in characters who were never meant to be heroes. Ed O'Neill noticed something fascinating about the fans who approached him. They never said he reminded them of themselves. They always said he reminded them of someone else. Their father, their brother, their uncle, never themselves. Because Al Bundy represented something uncomfortable, something honest. He reflected the parts of life people didn't like to admit existed. Failure, regret, disappointment, and endurance. That was the secret of the show's success. It wasn't about perfection. It was about survival. Behind the scenes, the cast carried emotional scars. They endured criticism, insecurity, and personal struggles. But together, they created something that outlived all of it. What began as a risky experiment became one of the longest-running and most influential sitcoms in television history. It changed what television could be. It proved that audiences didn't need perfect families. They needed honest ones. Today, decades later, the Bundy family still lives on, not just in reruns, but in the memories of everyone who watched them. Because beneath the insults, the dysfunction, and the laughter, there was something real. They weren't heroes. They were human. And maybe that's why we never stopped watching.